In this lesson, we're going to take a look at the MIB Continue sample compositing node. Now, the Continue node will basically tell anything in our scene, wherever that node is used, any kind of a ray tracing ray will continue right through that material. In other words, we'll receive really no interaction whatsoever. So in order to use this, we first need to have some kind of a material dropped into our scene. And just to make this a little bit different, let's take the DGS material, give it some kind of a nice green color so that way it's able to stand out and be different. Let's drop this onto our object and see what we get whenever we render. So you can see whenever we render out our image, we have this nice green DGS material dice. Now let's see what we can do with the Continue node to actually make this dice not renderable. So what we first need to do is take this DGS node, or any kind of a material that we use, any kind of a metal ray node, and take a look at its output connections so we can expose the shading group. Right? We need to get to this node, and what we basically will have to do is use the compositing node to bridge the connection between these two. So let's go down to the sample compositing node, take a look inside the sample compositing tab, and we want to use Continue. So Continue we use as the input. We use this DGS material. And now we'll go back to the shading group, take this MIB Continue node, and drag it into the material shader slot. Alright, so we basically, like I said, use this as a bridge to connect the DGS material to its shading group. Alright, now let's take a render and see what we get. So now, whenever we render, any kind of a ray tracing ray that will interact with this object will really just pass right on through. And so as a result, we don't see this object at all in our render. Now we do have the ability to control this as far as the overall transparency goes. So as we start to lower this transparency, we can actually force these rays to interact with this object again. And now you can see that our object is rendered, although now it's slightly transparent. So the interesting thing about this is that this Continue node can actually be used in more than just the basic material. You'll notice in our first render we were able to see the object itself as far as its shadows go, but we weren't able to see the geometry or the actual renderability to the camera. We can actually fix that if we were to take this DGS material. Let's say rather than having the material be transparent or not renderable, we instead wanted its shadow to not be renderable. So we can take this MIB Continue node, plug it into the shadow shader of this material, while still using the DGS as its basic shader. And now we have the object itself that renders out, but you'll notice that it has now no shadows. So really, what we're doing is very similar to what we would do if we were to just simply take an object and go into its render stats and change things like the primary visibility or its ability to cast and receive shadows. The only difference is that instead of doing this now on a per object basis, we can control this on a per material basis. So any object that is using this material that we have set up will now be either transparent to the primary rays or any shadow rays or anything else that we decide, such as photon interactions and things like that. So that's a look at how we can use this MIB Continue node.